Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're really glad to have you here. Our speaker today is Karen Romanowski. She's a registered nurse and she works as a memory care specialist and volunteer coordinator for the Pioneer Valley Memory Care Initiative. And this organization offers creative, innovative solutions to support people living with memory loss and their care partners in the community. And we have a very close relationship with the organization. And with that, I will turn it over to Karen, and she will be sharing her screen, and Kate will be putting everybody on mute. Okay? Well, Karen?
Great, thank you so much. I'll start before I start sharing my screen just to say how thankful I am for Amherst Neighbors and the other local neighborhood organizations. One of the things that is often prescribed to folks that have memory loss is to be more social. And one of the things that folks say that's difficult as they get older is to be social because sometimes their friends have passed away, sometimes their friends have moved, they're sometimes unable to participate in things they used to. And so organizations like Amherst Neighbors really makes it possible to connect with people and make new friends, basically, and make new neighbors. It's a more formalized way than when we used to only have, communication maybe with the neighbors in our that were directly next door. But it's been such a really lovely way to actually help folks really follow through on what the doctors are recommending, which is to stay social, stay connected. So with that, I will start sharing my screen. All right, and hopefully y'all can see that now. Just gonna make sure I can click forward. There we go.
Karen, for some reason, Karen, we can see you.
Oh, and not my screen?
We
Well, we
see
see both.
you and your screen.
That's a new one on me, I have to say. I've never noticed that before.
And am I impeding your view of the screen?
A little bit, not much, but a little
Not
bit.
much. We can actually see the words. You're down in the lower left-hand corner, in addition to being in the normal place that you'd be in a square on the right. But it's I don't know if anybody's ever noticed that before, but it's working. We can read. It's fine, actually. For now, go for it.
Okay, and I can't see myself, so yeah, I don't know. But hopefully, I'm also not going to just read. So I'm just going to start by telling you a little bit about the Pioneer Valley Memory Care Initiative, and I will probably use the acronym PVMCI so I don't get too tongue-tied. PVMCI was started in 2020. Cooley Dickinson did a community health assessment, and they found that, like pretty much everywhere else in this country, we just have a very rapidly growing community of people who are aging. We know that memory care is more likely to develop as people age. And they also found that people who are having memory loss have a difficult time accessing medical resources and support. And so Dr. Starr, who spoke previously with Amherst Neighbors, was one of the people who helped to put it together. And it's based on a system that's a free source out of UCFS, which is called Care Ecosystem, where people are trained to go into people's homes to meet with them regularly to provide education, support, and connection to community resources. We are grateful for funding from the Eisenberg Family Trust, Highland Valley Elder Services, and other grant sources. And as we were saying, we partner with neighborhood organizations, both Amherst, and then we also partner with Northampton and East Hampton, and local senior centers, the Alzheimer's Association, the Cooley Dickinson VNA and Hospice, the Alzheimer's Music Project, and Bright Spots Therapy Dogs. And as we were saying, we partner directly with Amherst Neighbors to do an additional training. So volunteers will go through the Amherst Neighbors training, and then if people are interested in volunteering with a community member who's living with memory loss, we will do an additional training through PVMCI that's specifically on dementia and basically ways to help support communication, activities, and also support care partners. What oftentimes the social visit to the person living with memory loss does is give a little bit of respite time and a little bit of break to the care partner as well. So we're super thankful for that partnership. And with permission, I just wanted to share a couple of these photos. There's Larry. He's been one of the folks who've been volunteering. And one of the things that Amherst Neighbors really does is help connect us with folks who have similar interests to the people we're trying to find social connection for. So you can see Larry playing ping pong with somebody. That was just somebody who identified that's the one thing I want to be doing. I've called Larry on occasion and said, do you have anybody who speaks Spanish? Do you have anybody who plays cribbage? And he's able to connect us with folks that have really similar interests or have specific skills that relate to somebody that could use support. Throughout this slide, just at the end, we'll have some time for conversation, but I do really encourage you to make sure you ask that question that you might have come wanting answered. Because oftentimes I think there's, I don't know who my audience is going to be and what base of knowledge they're going to have. So make sure you ask your question when the time arises. And I'm going to be sharing the slides with Amherst Neighbors so they can share them with you. There's a lot of links to additional resources. So once they share those slides, you can have all of that connection as well. My hope for today is to provide a little bit of an idea of what is normal memory loss or normal brain change as we age, and then what's abnormal. I think that comes up for pretty much everybody, and it's always a concern for everybody. I'm going to review healthy lifestyle changes to benefit brain health. Thankfully, I think a lot of the information has really been getting out there in the last year to 2 years, and so a lot of the information may be familiar. One of the things that I hope is to kind of spur you on to think about something that you might do, one or two things to try to start working to create change. And hopefully I'll provide an overview of some of the resources, and that's mostly in the slides and the links that I'll provide, and then answer any questions and concerns. So the aging brain. It's not surprising to any of us that as we get older, things change. It shows in our wrinkles, it shows in every part of us as we change, and that's happening in the brain as well. I don't get into a lot of specifics, but a lot of the links that you'll find on these pages will go into more of the brain science, and some of it's kind of tips and such, but some of it's really the science that if you're kind of a dementia nerd or brain nerd or aging nerd, you might enjoy some of those things. But what we know is that certain parts of the brain shrink, including those parts that are important to learning and complex mental activities. One of the biggest things that happens is that communication between neurons and all of the neurotransmitters becomes less effective. And so that's one area where there's things that we can do to kind of increase the way that they communicate and help with that neuroplasticity. Blood flow in the brain naturally decreases to some degree. It decreases more with some types of disease processes. And inflammation, which is talked about a lot nowadays, also can affect the changes of the brain. Inflammation, to a small degree, can be super helpful, helps the body respond to injury. But when there's chronic inflammation, it can cause much more of that problem of the neurons dying off, neurotransmitters not working as well. The link to this study, I think, was a pretty exciting one, which is basically that they studied over 3,000 adults and found that healthy lifestyle factors really make a difference. And they did the study such that, it wasn't like you had to do every intervention to see how things worked, but they were able to kind of see which interventions that folks did and how many of them, and then how that decreased the risk of developing memory loss. So people who engaged in 4 or 5 of the healthy activities, and if you go to the study, you'll see them, but we'll talk about some of them as well, can lower their risk by 60% of developing Alzheimer's. And it's important to know that some of these things they're really finding that that's regardless if you have a genetic risk, if you have what they call the APOE genetic risk factor, the healthy lifestyle factors can still have an impact. So it's really important for everybody, and including people. The studies haven't been done as much when somebody's already had memory loss, but both anecdotally and then also thinking about how healthy lifestyles make for better days no matter what's going on, I think is really important to thinking about. And then seeing that even if people didn't do all of the good activities, they still are lowering their risk by 37% if they changed two or three of their activities, which is huge in terms of thinking about a change in risk factor. I did want to tell just a little story, which is about one of the folks that I've worked with who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and was in the mild to kind of late mild stage when I met them. And like all of us, we can't always control what disease comes our way, what our bodies, we can do healthy things, but we can't control everything. So this person really did attach to knowing that they could do something and really kind of took those things to task and really, with family support, really helped to change things. Started eating fish twice a week, increased their fluid intake, and their veggie intake, started walking, and particularly started spending more time with people. And we've been following this person for 2 years and really seen both that they've been able to maintain incredible stability in terms of their function, but also, I think more importantly, has reported that the quality of their days is actually better than prior. So thinking about these kind of health-seeking behaviors, even in the midst of whatever process might be going on for one's body, actually improving the function of days and the way and the life satisfaction. This slide is sort of the general idea about, what is normal aging in terms of memory and what's a cause for concern. At the bottom, you will see the link, and again, I'll share that. It's where most of this information came from, and also just note that that whole website can be changed to Spanish language, so that's a really helpful one for sharing with other folks who might need that. But normal aging, it's very typical to have trouble recalling names, be slow to recall names, to misplace items, the old reading glasses, keys, all of those things we constantly walk in and out of the house looking for, forgetting where you parked, very typical part of aging, forgetting why you entered a room, difficulty finding words. One of the differences between sort of age-related kind of more typical and not is if oftentimes people are worried about their own memory. But if you ask your friends and your family, they say, oh no, that's normal. I lose my reading glasses all the time. In the case where somebody's actually having significant concern, oftentimes the person doesn't notice they're having memory problems. It's just that they're hearing from somebody that they have concerns. So that's a pretty significant one. Normal aging, people often have more difficulty with multitasking. And I think pretty importantly with normal aging, if one adds some kind of memory aid, whether it's a list or an app that helps or alarms on one's phone or a new calendar on the wall, those are effective. It's basically just kind of using more tools to kind of get to the same place, but still having the capacity to use the tools. Times when there is cause for concern is missing appointments, not being able to get to places on time when that used to be something you could do. Putting items in odd places, so not necessarily misplacing them, like putting your glasses, or losing them in your couch, but actually putting them in a strange place. Sometimes people will find bread in, their garage or something. just take it out there on their way to the car. Difficulty with navigation, walking, or driving is often a common self-reported one, where people will subjectively realize that they were kind of out and a place that was familiar to them all of a sudden didn't feel familiar. But a family member or friend might notice also that somebody stops noticing the navigation, whether it's the GPS navigation or the signs on the road. Asking the same questions repeatedly or telling the same stories repeatedly, though we all often, we can do that once, but if we don't say it, when our friend says to us, "Oh, you told me that," if you don't remember saying it, that's different. Getting lost in familiar places. And like I said, hearing from others that they have concerns, and you're not necessarily noticing them. That's next, the significant changes in personality and behavior. I'll talk a little bit about, there's different types of dementia and memory loss. With certain types of dementia, they show up more as changes in personality and behavior than what we think of typically in dementia, where with something like Alzheimer's, that sort of short-term memory loss sometimes presents more. And so sometimes if somebody really seems to be behaving in ways that are very outside of their usual behavior, that might be something to make sure that you get checked out. And then, as I said, memory aids become less effective. So things like calendars and task lists and those things, people aren't able to manage those in the same way. This is mostly covered, some of these slides I use for other things as well, but what I would add, is the piece at the bottom, which is sort of withdrawal from work or activities. It's those sort of changes in mood and personality that we don't always associate with memory loss. This is just a sort of general tips, for the typical age-related things that go on. And some of these I'll cover in the healthy lifestyle changes. The learn a new skill is going to be in the healthy lifestyle changes. One of the things that's good for everybody is having a daily routine. And that can really help with the forgetfulness. It can be having a hook right next to your door so that your keys always go on it. Anything that kind of aids in kind of keeping things in a more orderly fashion and including sort of developing routines around exercise and those other health-seeking behaviors. The to-do lists, the planning tasks. Some people use phone apps for memory, as well as alarms. And then I think I'm going to cover most of the rest of this, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. And again, and I just want to, at the bottom, you might want to look at that at another time, but I include a link to National Institute of Health study that basically looked at, is there anything that actually improves as we age in terms of our brain? And there are. And so I like to include that. There's also a lot of, there's some research on a lot of artists whose biggest and best works come at the end of life because of the ability for folks to be able to integrate things in a different way. And so I often am covering some of the negatives when I'm talking about memory loss in the beginning, but just to make sure that everybody keeps out there that there's also a lot of amazing things that happen as we get older and a lot of new capacities. What to do if you are concerned about yourself or your loved one. I think the biggest thing is to talk to family, friends, and primary care. Basically, one of our goals through our program is to reduce the stigma of memory loss. And what we also know is that when people have memory loss, that the treatments that we currently have available are most effective early in the process. And so it's really good to kind of go in sooner, get a baseline if you're at all concerned from your primary care physician, and have them look at the grand picture. You can see on this slide, there's some screenings that primary cares can complete, the mini-cog and the MOCA. And they're just kind of basic screening tools that are very standardized and incredibly helpful at kind of identifying areas that there might be something going on that might lead you to want to look a little further and help your primary care guide you. This slide is really just to cover what I had mentioned, which is just there's a lot of different types of memory loss and dementia. The one in the checked box is the treatable causes, and those are things that are reversible. The rest of them are, at this point in time, considered progressive, and there's a lot of things we can do to mediate, but we certainly don't have a cure for. Alzheimer's disease is the most common type of dementia. It's diagnosed in 60 to 80% of the cases of dementia. I would say that many people have mixed dementia, some pieces of all of different ones, and they do present quite differently. And so, I include this mostly to say that if you're noticing any of the brain changes that was talked about, again, it's really good to talk to the primary care because things present in different ways. So Lewy body dementia, sometimes there's hallucinations. Vascular dementia is often pretty confusing because it can present in a lot of different little areas around executive function, but they all present a little differently. And really the key is just to make sure you're talking with your primary care and getting things checked out. I include the part about reversible and irreversible because it's really, again, one of the reasons why you want to be sure you're talking to others and to your primary care if something's going on. Because if something is reversible, of course, the earlier you treat it, the better. Some of the common causes of reversible dementia-like symptoms are infection, delirium, depression, thyroid disorders, sleep apnea, medications, brain tumors, head injuries, metabolic imbalances, excessive alcohol or other substance use, and Lyme's disease. And the irreversible ones are the ones that mostly I kind of showed on that prior slide. So the good news after all that is that lifestyle changes can improve cognitive function and well-being at every age. And again, I think that that's the most important part to think about. The National Institute on Health, this statement I like to put up there, the best solution for healthy aging is not represented by disease treatments, but through the adoption of a correct lifestyle. I don't like the word correct. I think it's from the British side of things, but basically good healthy lifestyle choices. And the healthy lifestyle choices have no side effects as opposed to the other things. So I think it's really, I get pretty excited about it in terms of having worked in community health for a long time. I really see the difference. And, you know, sometimes it's somebody that I've met that when I went out, they were drinking a case of Coca-Cola a day. And then we, you know, slowly decrease and maybe they're only drinking 2 6-packs a day. And you really see a change in their blood sugar. So it can be baby steps, but they make a huge difference. At the bottom of this slide, you all may have recently heard or read about, it's fairly recent, there's this new brain health care score, and there's a link to it. It's a nice little screening tool to kind of see where you lie in terms of your lifestyle choices and which areas maybe you could make some changes in. So I encourage you all to check that one out. The same person who put that together, I believe it's out of Harvard and it's MGH, has something called the SHIELD method. And you'll see that SHIELD stands for sleep, handling stress, interacting with friends, exercise, learning new things, and diet. And that's because those are the sort of research-based things that we know can really help with brain health. The SHIELD model is a great one that I had created this slide some time ago because these are the things sort of as a home care nurse that I come across. So there's some additional ones. So it's a little bit of a different configuration that I like to cover, but it's really basically the same things that are based on the same issues that come up with that. So I'm just going to go through because each of those topics will be at the top of the page. So what I call managing health matters. Hypertension is a huge influence on brain health, and that's basically because the blood flow isn't as effective. And so what they've really found, and research has really supported, is that if you treat hypertension, then brain health is better. So those are the general goals. If that's something that's been a part of your health history, really good to talk with your physician if you're not reaching those sort of goals of 120 over 80 or less, or even in that elevated. But again, I think it's always about starting where you're at. If your blood pressure tends to run 150 over 90, then meeting more regularly with your physician and working towards reducing that and is always helpful whenever you can kind of go in the other direction. High cholesterol as well, for the same reason that it affects blood flow and the heart, and there's the goal there. Diabetes as well, and that's the goal. All of these things are influence your heart health, but the heart and the brain are completely connected. Depression and anxiety are ones that people don't always think about in terms of brain health, but we know that untreated depression and anxiety actually influences brain health and brain changes. And we also know that as people age, oftentimes the neurotransmitters, the receptors either aren't as effective or we're not producing as much of a neurotransmitter. Dopamine is often not as available. And so even folks who've thought, I've never had depression in my life, can find themselves a bit down as they get older. And it's really a physical change oftentimes. And so definitely making sure that gets treated. And some of the ways that it can present are not always so typical. It can be somebody feeling kind of numb, might be noticing that a friend is more apathetic, isn't engaging in their usual activities anymore, being more fatigued, irritable, poor sleep, appetite. So just being sure that those things are being addressed with your physicians. Hearing and vision, you've probably been hearing a little more about in the news as well. What we know is that all those neurons that are trying, it's important for them to be active and communicating. If they're not getting any input, they really can't be active. And so they will just kind of atrophy and get less useful. And so making sure that the input, whether it's through hearing aids or whether it's through corrective lenses, is coming in is really important. It keeps the brain moving and active and keeps all of those neurons firing. So making sure that you treat any and get tested for hearing loss. It's extremely common for people to not think they have any hearing loss and actually have hearing loss. Dental care is very important. There's a strong connection between poor dental health and heart disease. And then again, the heart is connected to the brain. And so anything that's affected the heart is going to affect your brain health. They often talk about really trying to stay up on your dental care the older you get, both because there's changes, like we have less saliva, and so then we're more at risk that way. But also things get in the way of getting to the dentist, sometimes even more as we get older. So making sure you stay up on that. The thyroid is not always, again, talked about so much, but that's a reversible cause of brain changes sometimes if thyroid levels are off. So just making sure that you follow through on getting your usual lab work that your primary care orders. And if they haven't ever ordered a thyroid test, making sure that they do. And if you're noticing changes in somebody, that's also something good to get checked. And then, of course, if you use tobacco, making sure that you speak with your physician about resources to quit. And I was kind of mentioning this, the heart and the brain are completely interrelated. So whatever you do to protect your heart also helps your brain. The brain needs blood flow, and it depends on oxygen and adequate blood flow to work well. And I include this slide because I think I was struck when I saw that 25% of the blood from every heartbeat goes to the brain. That was pretty significant to me, even as a nurse. And that's from the Alzheimer's Association information, but it makes you realize that just how important your heart health is, and then how all of these pieces can influence that. Again, I think so much more information in the news these days about how important physical activity is. I like to call it physical movement rather than exercise, because some people have never enjoyed exercise in their whole life, and it really is about moving. It can be, carrying your laundry or hanging your laundry on the line. It doesn't have to be what we, sort of typically think of as exercise. And the numbers are a little all over the place right now because there's a lot of studies being done, but the general recommendation is 150 minutes per week of moderate to vigorous intensity. And that really means that you're noticing that your heart's beating faster and it's a little more difficult to talk at the same time as exercising. And generally, the more the better, aside from, there's some research on the far extreme of extreme athletes who do like ultra marathons and things that maybe that's not as healthy. But most of us don't have to worry about that. They really encourage including balance and strength training and weight bearing, both for maintaining muscle mass and bone health, and also for the prevention of falls. That didn't used to be as much a part of the recommendation, but that there's a lot of research coming out right now about how helpful that is. Any movement's good movement, and thinking about ways to help encourage you to move if you're not someone who tends to move. And sometimes that's finding an accountability partner, somebody who you say, we're going to walk every day at this time, or that kind of thing. The other thing that they're finding about physical movement is that it's important to change it up. So it's important to be using the muscles in different ways for them to maintain mass and strength. And so if you walk for 15 minutes, 5 days a week, good to kind of switch that up with doing something a little different. Like you might, sit in your chair and lift some cans of beans or anything. But basically, you want to be kind of switching up what muscles you're using, how you're using them. And that's the best way to really maintain the strength of all the muscles. You've probably also read in the last years, but certainly since COVID, there were unfortunately, COVID gave us the opportunity to really study what social isolation and loneliness, what effect it had on health. And one of the studies was just on older adults, and what they found is that folks are at higher risk for heart disease, depression, and cognitive decline who are isolated and feel lonely. And it's interesting that it isn't, it's not necessarily that people need to see a bunch of people being a lot of different things. Some of it's the perception of loneliness. So it's really having opportunities to connect with people in lots of different ways and in ways that are appropriate for one's own, the way they've generally been moving through their life and what feels right to them. Amherst Neighbors is a great example of, an organization that's really been helping to promote that. I encourage the folks that I meet with to connect with family and friends or reconnect with family and friends. I encourage them to find new friends, and I put in quotations, family, because sometimes people would rather create a new family than be with their birth origin family. I highly encourage volunteering and any kind of meaningful activity that connects you with people. But as a general rule, volunteering is just a win-win for both ends. And it really is incredibly helpful for brain health. It's something new, it's something different, and it's socialization. I encourage people to plan a gathering, and a lot of folks, as they get older, they say, "Oh, I used to have these dinner parties and they were so fun, but I can't do that anymore." And sometimes I'll work with a particular person and I'll say, "Okay, well, how about just like picking up some oranges and inviting a couple of neighbors over?" And without fail, it's a win. Basically, thinking about a gathering in any way, and that basically there's almost always folks who are just so happy to be invited and to be connected. I encourage folks to utilize the senior centers and all of the local events. I was going to include Newsies on this slide, but all of the senior centers are available to everybody. You don't have to only go to the one in your local town. There's certain things that there's waiting lists for, but what I've found is that people consistently find one that kind of feels like a better fit for them. So my encouragement is that if you first go and it doesn't feel like a good fit, try out another one. And then for some folks who've been introverts their whole life, who really are not looking for lengthy connections, I encourage them to go into stores, take a walk in the park, and chat. And some of the folks that I've met with have really gotten to know people that work in the stores that they frequent, and that's basically their socialization during the day, and it's plenty for them. But basically, any way that people are connecting is a good thing for brain health. They always talk about managing stress as important to brain health. I have, as a nurse, always found that incredibly vague, and most people feel it's stressful to be told to manage their stress because they're trying the best they can. But some of the things we know that help manage stress are being physically active. Meditation is proven to be helpful for managing stress, as is Tai Chi, Qigong, journaling, connecting with others, practicing gratitude, deep breathing, and if you have a spiritual practice, utilize it or consider adding that into your life. Sleep is also important to think about in terms of brain health and body health. We know that sleep apnea is a risk factor for memory loss, and fortunately, they've come up with much better testing. It's more comfortable, as well as much better treatments. And I've really seen, again, kind of anecdotally, some folks really have huge improvements in their function after treating their sleep apnea. So I encourage anybody who has those symptoms of sleep apnea to, or who have ever been told that they have sleep apnea, to follow up with their physician. Pain often affects sleep, and some people just kind of try to grin and bear it, but wake up 7 times a night. So talking with your physician about that is important. Trying to have a routine around sleep, avoiding eating large meals or drinking a lot of liquid within 2 to 3 hours of bedtime. Exercising really helps with sleep, but generally not if you do it too close to bedtime. Napping late in the afternoon or for long periods during the day tends to negatively influence sleep. Paying attention to caffeine, avoiding alcohol because it also interferes with sleep, even though it helps people to fall asleep sometimes quickly in the short term, it interferes with sleep. And avoiding screens and electronics. I include injury prevention on my list, primarily because any head injury also increases the risk for brain changes. So protecting your brain as best you can as you get old is important. And one of the ways you can do that is to reduce fall risks and be paying attention to not doing risky things. So one of the things I now do is hold onto the railing when I'm walking down the stairs with my laundry basket, which I didn't used to do. But thinking about those things in your home that might be a little questionable, or that if you have children and they've said to you, oh, it makes me nervous when you do that, paying attention to them. Wearing seatbelts and helmets. We talk a lot about this in our work, is plan for retirement from driving. So studies show that even when somebody has not been using alcohol, the risk of car accidents rise after age 55. And so it's just important for all of us to think about, what am I going to do when it's time for me to stop driving and when it's not safe, whether it's because my leg isn't bending properly, whether my vision's gone, my hearing's not working quite well enough, and really thinking about that for the future. I have a list of things to think about with medications, and then I include in here strength and balance training, because what they're really finding in terms of research is that doing the strength and balance training helps to prevent the falls. I think also in the news a lot has been sort of thinking about ways to strengthen the brain. What the research seems to be saying is that it's great to do, the games, the Wordle, all of those sorts of things if you're a crossword puzzle. But one of the things that's most important is to do new things. And it's kind of like what I was saying about the muscles, is that if we just use the same muscle every day, that's one thing, but we need to actually be varying things. And that's very true. We know that neurons do die off in the brain, and as we age, but we also know that we can grow some new connections, and that neuroplasticity is possible. And one of the best ways to do that is to try to learn something new. You do not have to become good at it. It's just actually challenging your brain in new ways that haven't been tried before, and then it creates new pathways that can be used for lots of different ways. Recently, there's been a lot of news about alcohol and reducing alcohol use. This is just a slide of what the current recommendations are from the CDC. I expect we'll keep hearing more in coming months and years about this, but one of the reasons it's been at the forefront is that we know that it raises the risk for many health problems: memory, cardiovascular, depression, bleeding, liver disease, cancer, sleep problems. So really important to think about limiting and trying to stay within the guidelines. And there's a lot more question just in the health. There's much higher use of cannabis. I think overall the use of alcohol has been going down nationally, but the use of cannabis has been going up. What we mostly know is that more research is needed. There's some research that shows that cannabis can affect certain medications, anti-seizure medications, and blood thinners. So particularly important to talk to your physicians if you're taking any of those. But as a general rule, just always good to let your physician know if that's something that you're doing. Healthy food choices, really important for brain and body. They talk about one of the most important things is that you enjoy your food. And so really thinking about choices that work for your budget, work for your cultural traditions, your personal preferences, and preparation, that if it's not gonna work for you because you're not going to like it, it's not worth trying. But how do you incorporate small changes? At the bottom is information on the diets that are research-based to improve brain health, or at least help keep it stable, but are also good for the body. Again, it's all interconnected, and those links will give you a lot of information. I like to say the most basics are that you want to think about nutrient-dense foods, more plant-based options, and avoiding ultra-processed foods. And at the end of my slides, one of the things that's been coming up recently with the ultra-processed foods is that there's some plant-based options that are ultra-processed, and they're not necessarily the best options. And so there's a link to how do you know if something's ultra-processed. And it can be helpful to kind of think about that. Limiting foods and beverages higher in sugars, limiting alcohol, and then salt intake. So it's really the MIND diet and the Mediterranean diet that are the ones that are have been researched, and there's links that you can look at your convenience. There's research to say that the Mediterranean diet prevents muscle mass reduction, prevents loss of bone density, prevents cardiovascular disease, decreases inflammation, preserves sexual capacity, prevents cognitive decline, helps the immune system, and it was associated with a decreased risk of comorbidities from COVID-19. So really, that's to say the Mediterranean diet is kind of doing all of those things I've spoken about, in terms of supporting both the brain and the heart. I include this because even though it's not really, a lifestyle change, I think it's important that I've seen this enough in my work where when folks wait too long to do their legal and financial planning, or to think about how they're going to be transported from one place to another if and when they can't drive, or how they're going to access more people in community and stay active. Those are important things to be thinking about as we age and not waiting until we hit the wall where we're feeling isolated in our homes. So just encouraging folks to do that. I know Amherst Neighbors does a lot of good programming on that. And at the bottom, and again, I'll share the link, there's a worksheet from the Alzheimer's Association, and it's really kind of a very basic worksheet, but it's kind of like helping us to think about what can I change, and making small steps. And I always think when I'm working with folks, one of the things I talk with is, what's the barrier? Because oftentimes people say, well, I'd like to make a change in my diet, or I'd like to exercise more. And so I often talk with them about what the barrier is, and then that sometimes becomes the things that helps get them to the next place. And I'd encourage you to talk about those barriers with your friends and your family, because oftentimes they have great ideas. And then the rest is of the slides are mostly resources that will be shared with you. I wanted to share that the top here, you'll see there's a newish organization called Everyday Wellbeing in the area that offers classes and talks that are donation based. So if from free to whatever donation you want to make in yoga, meditation, qigong, and they do some other talks, and they're going to be expanding. And they do some of that both locally and some's online at the Munson Library, currently at Andrew's Greenhouse in the good weather, and then online. All of the councils on aging, the senior centers. I've been encouraging a lot of folks I work with to go to the university museums and greenhouses through the cold months right now. And then I've included a list of options of places that you can connect with in terms of volunteer offerings. I included at the bottom there bright spot therapy dogs. If anybody has a dog that they would love to train to become a therapy dog, Bright Spot does that. And through our program, we actually have some funding to pay for people to get their dogs trained. So you could contact me about that too. And then there's just some more general resources. That's where you'll see that one on how do you find out if it's an ultra processed food, and resources and connections for one of the best things that folks can do as they get older is consider seeing a geriatrician. Geriatrics is basically the focus of medicine on seniors and their unique healthcare needs. I always like to bring up that Benadryl is an over-the-counter medication that can affect memory. And it's something that's kind of just ubiquitous. People, doctors prescribe it. But there's many things like that geriatricians know, and that they can kind of look at the whole picture of what's going on for somebody in the context of aging, and what a person's goals are, and think about how to guide them best. So Dr. Drew Avjani is the geriatrician at Cooley Dickinson. Dr. Starr has started a private practice. There's that contact. Those are the only folks I think in the Pioneer Valley, but there are folks then down in Hampton and in Franklin. The contact for my agency, not my agency, but the Pioneer Valley Memory Care Initiative that I work for, and then a few other organizations. And I think I will stop sharing there. So that was a lot of fast talking. And I'd love to let somebody else talk and have any questions, but also if there's any other resources that folks want to share with one another. as well.
Okay, so if someone would like to ask a question, there's two ways you can do it. One way is just to raise your hand if we can see you. But on the bottom of your screen, there should be a react. It's a little heart icon. And if you click on that, it will show you a raise hand. And if we see the raise hand, one of us will call on you. Okay, so we're now open questions.
Many of
And
you are hidden, so we can't see you. If you want to ask, you want to turn your video on, that would be helpful. But anybody that has a question, please feel free. So I'm gonna say something to get it going, and hopefully others will have a thought or two. I wanted Karen to say that that was very thorough. Like you covered a lot of important territory. Very practical though. I mean, it was it was just hitting on everything that's relevant for us, and it was in very plain language for us to kind of chew on. One of the areas or two things that caught my eye, and I certainly don't want to miss it. The socialization and loneliness issue that you put a plug in for volunteering as one of the ways for which people can be with people. And so for those of you that where that fits and you're looking for ways, there really are a lot of opportunities both at Amherst Neighbors, both at the Pioneer Valley Memory Care Initiative and through our town. So please give that serious thought. The only other comment I wanted to make or question was in new learning, that whole idea of new learning, kind of challenging yourself cognitively to be stimulating your brain, your reaction time, your mind. What are some of the things that have crossed your sphere that are good? I'm thinking of like card games or bridge or dance or what are some of the things that have you're learning about and others maybe would want to share that have been helpful for them that are on this call?
Yeah, from my end, I would say yes, 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 basically to everything you said, in terms of the different activities, because that's the idea is really it's something that you haven't done. And so everybody is pretty unique in that way. Myself, I picked up the ukulele about a year ago. It feels like I could probably be doing this for a very long time and still be learning something new because I've got, my learning curve is so steep. I've never played a musical instrument. I know the senior center has an auto harp a time that people can go in and learn, but it is doing anything. It can also be travel, going to new places, really just, I'd say anything that gives a person the feeling of like, huh, didn't know this or, never experienced this before. And also might create just a little bit of anxiety because it's so foreign to you. You just kind of like, huh, I don't know how to do this. And that basically you're tapping into places in your brain that haven't been explored, or at least not anytime recently.
yeah, I could add to that because I've had a really, very, to me, shocking experience with something new learning. Is that my son's an artist and he takes art lessons from a teacher in South Hadley. And so for my birthday, he gave me a gift certificate of 4 lessons in fine art painting with oils. And I told him I wasn't going to do it. I said, there's no way that I am going to do oil painting, especially because he's so good. And he said, no, you got to try it. I said, and I really did not want to go, but I felt guilty about turning in my son's Christmas present. And I've never painted one time in my life. And I've taken these oil painting lessons, and I painted this orange in oils. That's gorgeous. And I'm showing it to all my friends. And and I've noticed, and this may sound really strange, but I've noticed in my brain that I feel refreshed. I do artwork on my own, but I've been doing the same artwork for 8 years, and I do the same thing over and over again. But doing the oil paintings was so out of my, I mean, just really far out of my range. So I'm now signing up for at Snow Farm, which is a craft center in um, out out in Western Mass. I'm signing up for bird carving. I've never done carving in my life. So I do, even though it sounds kind of corny, is to do new learning. I would just like to kind of reinforce, Karen, that for me recently to doing that, I agree with you, and it was surprising to me how much different I felt after that experience.
Excellent. Any other thoughts, questions? Go for it. But you got to
Claude,
unmute yourself, Claude.
Claude,
Uh,
you're muted.
yeah, we need to figure out how to unmute him.
Okay, can you unmute Claude?
Okay,
There we
so
go.
Yeah, there you go.
what are the good numbers with this what's the name of that? Oximeter,
The
pulse
pul-
oximeter. There's two numbers on this. What are good numbers?
So usually the pulse oximeter has both your oxygenation, that's, about how well you're getting oxygenated. That number you would love to see above 90, and ideally above 95. And then often it also has I'm not looking at yours, but it also has your pulse on it often. And that, you
What are
know,
the good numbers? What are good numbers? Well, my numbers very often are 98, 99. Okay, I guess that's a good one.
so that's
Yeah.
great for your oxygenation. And then your pulse, maybe 60 to 80 would be lovely. But if it's, it depends on what you've been doing.
Okay, 80. I'm between 80 and 85 these days. So
Okay, Claude, you pass.
You sound like you're doing great.
Yeah.
thank you. I also have uh, how to read my uh, blood pressure, but the instruction are a little complicated. So anyway, but what are good numbers for blood pressure?
Ideally, 120 over 80 or lower. They just lowered that in the last years or so, and that is very true. But, so don't be alarmed if you're higher than that, but definitely talk with your physician. And if you're having any trouble utilizing it, you can actually ask just to pop into your primary care and they will just do a check. You don't have to go in for a full visit. You could just call them and say, could I come in for a blood pressure check? And oftentimes CVS or Walgreens also will do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
Luke, you're muted. Okay. Now you're muted. Okay.
Okay, okay. No, I had a thought when I heard about learning the ukulele, um, and new paths for somebody. An instrument that's not difficult to learn, the recorder, either the soprano or the alto. And I would suggest if someone's interested in learning it, there's a wonderful volume makes it sound like a tone, but it's not two. Uh, Books by they're both by Hugh Orr, Orr. I think he's Canadian. For alto or for soprano, there's a book one and book two. And the other thing about learning the recorder is it is very, very good socially because much this wonderful music written for two recorders, three recorders, transcribing Bach fugues. Any rate, I just suggest that as a possibility and using Hugh Orr as an entry. The last thing about it is plastic recorders, don't poo-poo them. They are very good and not that expensive generally.
Thank you, Luke.
I love those tips. And I also, that's just the sort of idea that I love also that somebody like yourself then also says, oh, anybody want to get together, from Amherst neighbors and play. And start working on a couple pieces. I like also the idea with these healthy ideas for the brain and body to kind of, I say feeding the bird with one seed, feeding two birds with one seed instead of the other saying. But the idea that you combine them, you're learning a new skill and you're also having a social activity is such a great thing. Any other tips out there for new learning ideas?
Well, I was going to ask if you could speak to the challenge of habit. Like a lot of us are 60, 70, 80, 90 years old. We're creatures of habit. And we eat what we eat. Our patterns are so like, but you've really brought forward the value of movement, the value of eating healthier, maybe uh, you know, what are some of the things that you've seen or tips that you would say are helpful to get people to take baby steps in this direction, because a little is better than none, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I would say a couple things. One is doing baby steps. I think is the most important, because as a general rule, if we bite off too much, we just can't do it. So, when I work with folks, we often will just choose something very small. For that one person I spoke of, who had never eaten fish in their whole life, it's kind of having a conversation with them. You could do that with your family member. You could do that with a friend, of like, what could you imagine changing, if I asked you to change something in your diet? And this person said, "Oh, well, I used to like eating fish. I think I could do that. I haven't eaten it in years." And so something really small. The other thing, like around exercise, that I would say is something that works, two things that work well that I see consistently. One is that it gets put onto the calendar as if you're going to a doctor's appointment. Um, because otherwise life just keeps going on and it doesn't happen. The other is finding someone to do it with who holds you accountable. So having an accountability partner. And for some people, like myself, I often pay to do something active, because once I've paid, I can't believe I'm spending that much money and I better do it. So, like, what's the thing that's going to hold you accountable? And then I would add that as a general rule, what I work with folks, and I think research supports this, is we're going to try this for 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, we're going to see if you didn't do it, what was the barrier? We're going to talk about that. But usually, if people can do something for 2 weeks, it starts to become routine for them. And if at the end of 2 weeks, they haven't done it, there's something that's getting in their way, and then we're going to work on what that is. And I would say that, it is useful to talk with somebody, talk through that. Mhm. Anybody else have ideas about that, about what's worked for you with creating routine or adding something new, a positive health change in your life? Looks like Natalie,
Go
maybe?
for it, Natalie.
Okay, I realize how much I do repeatedly. For like 50 years, I've walked in the morning and I memorize poetry, but I do the same walk. I add poems, but I also do the same Tai Chi at the Bank Center. We repeat and repeat. I do a lot of same things. And I think I need the ukulele and to find my kazoo. It's fascinating to me to recognize how I do my weights Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I do Tai Chi Monday. I'm too scheduled. So I'm gonna break out. Who knows? I'd love this presentation. Is there a way to see it again? And I
Yes,
want
there
to be
is.
like you. You
Well,
are
when this presentation is over, Kay Lissick will be sending everyone who participated the link to the slideshow.
all right, because my
Um,
husband and his men's group are downstairs talking
Yeah.
about a book, but I think they all need this presentation too.
Well, the other thing you can do is when you go to the Amherst Neighbors website,
Okay,
we have a link, a YouTube link, and
okay,
Kay will be uploading uploading this presentation to our YouTube site. And you
okay,
can see every presentation that we've done in the last several years on
okay.
our web homepage.
All right, thank you for being Amherst Neighbors. I've gone a few times, but you're a great group.
Well, I just got an idea, Karen. Amherst Neighbors has something called interest groups. It's where people get together who have a common interest. But it seems to me if someone would do it, there should be an interest group on healthy brains. And what people are doing, maybe meet once a month. And I just think what Natalie just said is really, just so poignant, is that it's a small change that Natalie has to make. But talking to someone about it and being accountable, like every month, this group of people, are going to get together and they're going to talk about based on Karen's presentation,
Yeah.
what are we doing, for our healthy brains? And just kind of sharing some of those ideas, because I do think a support group, a fun one, would be a good thing that Amherst Neighbors could do for our members. It wouldn't be hard to set up.
Now I'm talking too much, but the other action that is such a challenge is, when do you stop driving? And I love to drive. I think maybe someday I'll have cataracts. I have a husband who's 6 years older and who also, it's a very touchy, it's a very difficult. I mean, well, anyway, I'm stumbling around. I don't know. And I guess most accidents happen within 5 miles of your home. I don't know if that's still true or not, but
No,
it's a challenge.
It's a very valid point, Natalie. And, Karen, do you have any thoughts on the whole driving issue? We've all probably dealt with it, either with a friend, a loved one, a parent. It's challenging.
Yeah, I think, fortunately, I think there will continue to be more options as time progresses. One thing that is now available, is that people can have driving evaluations. I think both Bay State and actually Trinity, and then a place out east also, and they're done through occupational therapists. And so the driving evaluations look at everything. It's not like a driving test you go on the road. It's kind of like, how's your vision, how's your hearing, how's your reaction time. So it really is a very thorough evaluation. And for myself, I hope that I will go get that when people are questioning me. Most people don't. It's such a freedom in this country to be able to drive, and we
Right.
don't have great public transportation.
Right.
We do have, and most physicians have, something called a transportation folder that we hand out with all of the current, options. But if people have the financial resources, I encourage them to start, trialing using Uber or Lyft once in a while, just to see what that experience is like, or trial
Oh,
taking the
yeah.
bus, or trial taking,
Yeah.
and then the senior centers also have driving services that you can call them and they can set up for you. Just to explore those options, sometimes do it with a
Yeah.
friend, see what it feels like, whether you would consider doing it. Hopefully, we'll keep having more options as time goes by, but it's a really challenging thing. And it's something that I think about of, will I want to move sooner than later where I could be walking places, or where there was a train, or, those sorts of things. It's a big
Karen,
topic.
could you add that to the list of resources, the driving evaluation?
Yes, I will do that.
That's I've never heard of that, and I think
Yep.
that's excellent.
Yep.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
Natalie, keep on
I
going.
promise this
Go
is my
ahead.
last time, but I know someone who's done the driving evaluation, and then it's kind of left up to that person. But the other thing is, I have several friends who have found individuals who will drive them, like to Mass General or to Bay State. And it would be great to have those names on a list for you people. I mean, I wrote down one person's name.
Okay, so let me make a comment just so for Natalie and anyone else that doesn't know, one of the primary services that Amherst Neighbors volunteers support and help with are driving requests. So for people, your point that none of us are going to want to let go of driving, right? It's a spirit of independence. You're in control. You go where you want to go, when you want to go. It's like the last thing,
Yeah.
any of us are going to want to let go of. And it's going to be a tug of war. But when it happens, there are many members of Amherst Neighbors, when they want to go to the bank, they want to go to the food store, they want to go to see a doctor, they put a request in, and we match a volunteer to help get them to that location. So it's a service that we provide. It allows many people who are living in their own home in our community to get from point A to point B and get things done. So you need to know that. The senior center has a van that often is working on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So there are options in addition to the volunteers that we work with. So
Thank you. Thank you.
And there's, I think they're working to set in motion, some assistance through Cooley Dickinson too. So I'm hoping that's going to happen in the next year.
mhm.
Okay, any last questions? Anybody want to raise their hand or give me an emoji here? Well,
I'm,
the
do-
last,
I'm double checking the chat before we close it down, just in case.
Okay.
So if somebody said, so we can watch it later, the answer is yes. It'll be on our website, on the YouTube channel. The slideshow we can send out. There's a thank you from Michael Childs, who is seconding the value of the bright spot therapy dogs. It's a great way to socialize. And he and Diane do train dogs, so he knows that world well. I think that pretty much gets it.
yeah. Well, Karen, thank you so much. Overall, I'd say your presentation was very positive. And the kinds of changes. I mean, I actually feel a little bit uplifted after your presentation. I thought it was going to be a real downer, but because the changes, aren't really that great, and they're all very doable. And I just want to remind people before we go, and after I thank Karen, is that there will be a survey when you leave Zoom. There's a little survey of 3 questions that we would appreciate if you would answer about the presentation. And I thank everyone for coming.
Well,
Many
thank you
thanks,
for,
Karen.
thank you. And I look forward to seeing you all through Amherst Neighbors at some point again.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'd like to speak with you before we go.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Bye-bye.
Karen. Thank you, everybody.
Who did you want to speak to?
Okay.
I heard a K. Recommend me.
Yeah, Kay, you can stop the recording and maybe.
Oh, yeah, you can stop the recording.